Well, we've got the old Fiesta up on the ramp again, and I've been driving it around. There's a horrible jingling noise coming from suspension, and it was almost like someone banging a triangle, and I can hear it when I went over a bump, and it started suddenly. So I thought I'd investigate, and after looking around for a bit I found out what it was. And in here on the top of the shock absorber here, there is the end of the spring. This thing, the end of this spring has dropped down in there, and that's what's bouncing up and down, sounding a bit like you can hear it, sounding like a spring. So that's the problem. There's your problem. So I'm going to show you how to change a Fiesta spring. This one's done 109,000 miles, and she's sitting a bit low on the front, so we're going to whop some springs on her. So I'll show you how to do it step by step. I've got my assistant cameraman here. He's going to help. His name's Roger. So without further ado, let's get to it. Well, the first thing to do is to remove the nuts off these off the struts support onto the stub axle, which is these two down here. There's one there. It's 15mm on one end, and the big end is 18. Now I'm going to spray a little bit of the old release agent on there, because you can see they're looking pretty rusty actually. So let's rip them off. Get them out the rest of the way with the impact driver now. Just need to get. I haven't got a long 18mm socket. The 18mm seems to be an odd size in some of these socket sets. Right, so let's put a 15 ratchet in. And then we can carry on this. So there's the two bolts undone. The nuts have been removed from this end, and they're just sitting there at the moment. So we're going to turn our attention to inside the bonnet. So let's go up there. Inside the bonnet, we're looking at the top of the strut, and you can see there's the nut on the top of the strut that holds the top swivel joint on, and then the whole thing, the strut, is held in by these three bolts. There's one on here, one on there, and one right under there. Can you see it in the middle of the picture by that leaf? Let's move that leaf out of the way. Down in there. So we've got to take these three bolts out. This one, there, and this one. And I've done one of these before. So this is the air conditioning pipe, this thing. You don't want to start pulling that around, but you can undo it and move it away slightly. So you can move it slightly, but don't wrench it about, otherwise you're going to break a seal or the pipe, and you'll start leaking all your air conditioning gas out, which you don't want. Okay, so next time you see it, these three bolts will be removed and the strut will be able to be withdrawn downwards. We've got some more to do before we do that, so let's just free that off for now. Just be reminded it's tea time. So those three bolts are now, or three nuts should I say, are now removed. See the three studs just sitting there. So in theory the strut will withdraw downwards, so we need to go back underneath the wheel arch and have a go. Okay, so we've undone the brake pipe, we've removed and freed the ABS cable, we've removed the jock blink, it's ready to pop out, and then we can take these two bolts out. One, bear in mind that once you've done that, this strut is not supported any longer. There's nothing holding it in except stiction or friction, I guess. Right, you can see it. So there we are. That's the bolts out, and give it a bit of a pull. Roger's going to transfer the camera to Roger. He's just going to film me trying to wrestle this thing out. You got it?
What stops it then? Just hit it again.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to get that out. So that's the axle with the drive shaft attached, and the question is, remove that from there, like that, and then find a way through with this to drop it out. And there we have it. That's the strut removed. And now we're going to get on and get the spring compressor on it, and we'll change the spring. And you can see it's broken down here. So it's broken off down the end. It's where they normally fracture actually. Okay, so let's go to the next stage. Okay, so to get the spring off, you've got to get this top mount off. This is a top swivel joint. There's a nut on there, but we need to compress the spring, so you're going to need some spring compressors. They basically hook onto the spring somewhat like so, and then you tighten up the bolt on the top, and hopefully they will compress the spring enough for you to get the bolt out. Unfortunately, you have to compress the new springs, which are much longer, and that's when it becomes complicated, because it's a little bit hazardous, so you have to be careful, keep your fingers clear, and always bear in mind that the spring compressor could slip, scoot round the spring, catch your finger, so keep your hands clear when you're doing this is the best bet. So get as many turns as you can in there. Make sure it's hooked over properly, like that. And then hope for the best is the way I do it. Need extension for this. One extension, 1/2 inch. Right, so let's have a go at compressing this spring. A little bit at a time. Slowly, slowly, catchy monkey. You can also do this by hand. Is this free? Yeah, I think we're okay now. Look, we've got some play in the top bearing. It's loose. So then we've got to go through that procedure again, where we find a. We're looking at the top of the strut. We're looking at the top of the strut now, and we've got a 19mm ring spanner, 19, 18 as well, good old Ford 18, and a 6mm chrome and vanadium Allen key, which goes in the end of there, and make sure it's engaged properly. So I'm just going to engage that, and then Roger will take the camera over. It's running. Just go in there and point and squirt. So we're going to need a little bit of application on this, I should think. So here we go. Not careful, you're going to bend your Allen key. This is the whole issue with these car designs, whereas they corrode slightly in use. No, it's not going to do. There's nothing to hold on to, so we're going to get the impact driver on the job. See whether she can loosen her up. The impact driver will work against the inertia of the rod, so it's smacking it. So let's just try that. Except it will go on. Something moved. Something moved. Good for you? Yes, it was. Come on, baby, you can do it. Yeah, there you go. So borrow an impact driver. You might need an impact driver. It's just a handy thing for getting stuff undone, where you're using the inertia of the thing it's bolted to as the other hand for your spanner. So squeaky squeaky. Okay, you get the idea. I'll just finish off taking this bolt off. It's getting tighter. Work it up and down slightly.
Doesn't seem to be going off.
It is. I think it is.
Oh, that is, but the camera on it.
No, it's still recording. Press the button. Press the button again. Red button. Press the little red button and she'll stop. The central nut has been removed. It's been slotted into a hole in the bench. Can you remind me it's there, please? Thank you. And we'll take the top bearing off. It's the top swivel joint. Actually, it's the top. That's the shock absorber part, the holder plate. This is the actual bearing here. This thing. This horrible plastic abomination. You'd never see one of those on a Volvo or a Mercedes. Then there's a rubber doofo which goes in the end of the spring. Actually, it's the concertina thing as well. It's built in on this one, so at this point I think I can lift the whole of the defunct spring off. There we go. So we left the strut behind and we got the spring. Now we've got to release the spring from the spring compressors and then compress a new spring, so we'll get back onto that in a moment or two. Fending spring is off. You can see that there's quite a lot of corrosion there. I wonder if it was a corrosive issue or just, you know, bad spring. Don't know, they all break. I mean, Mercedes have broken springs in it. And then here, look, there's the concertina, the seal. In the middle, that bit in the middle is the bump stop, so don't forget to put that back. That's to stop over travel. It's a big sort of spongy rubber thing that if you go over a bump, that helps to cushion the blow. Okay, so time to find the new springs and put the compressors on. Think about it. I bought some springs for my wife's Mercedes, and if you buy the wrong ones, they're just bits of bent metal, and within 18 months your nose will be dragging on the ground. And she said, I don't know what's wrong with my car, it keeps bumping on the ground and picking up gravel. And I looked at it, and these shitty springs which I bought from Euro Car Parts had just completely sagged over the period of 6 months. They're absolute rubbish. So do your homework and get yourself some decent springs, and whatever you do, do not buy the cheapest, because you'll be in the same situation in a year's time. It's really good advice, get the best ones you can. Yeah, so the spring is now compressed. The name of the game is to get as many of the turns in as you can, and before you tighten it all up, just make sure there's nothing catching on the bottom of the strut, because sometimes when you put the spring compressors on, you go to present the spring and this is hitting the plate, so you have to think it through carefully and be careful. I think that's enough, but obviously the new spring is much longer than the old spring. I think the new spring is about 4 inches longer than the old spring, so a lot more compressing is needed because it's a brand new part. So yeah, there we are. So it's compressed in position. I've just got to put the parts back on and put that nut back on the top, and I'll come back when the strut's reassembled. Yeah, when you put this back, you can see where it's been. You can see there's an indentation from the spring, where the spring's been resting the rubber, and you really want to ideally realign that so the end of the spring goes back into this indent there, and then you can drop it down, put it in position, and when you put this back on, that drops on top. But be aware that when you put this plate back on, there's the ends of the actual mounting bolts here. These flat flanges fit into these 3 depressions in the top mount swivel bearing, so just make sure they're all lined up before you put them back. Then of course this nut just goes back on the top in the reverse process as when we took it off. So that's the strut reassembled with the new spring. The top nut's been tightened up. I've checked that everything is seated properly and engaged where it was before. The end of this spring down here needs to be round against this stop. So you just need to rotate everything into the right sort of angular relation to each other before you tighten it down. So I'm just going to wrestle that back in position. But the assembly is just the reverse operation. Yeah, so putting it together, it's all back on, the nuts and bolts are all in, the ABS sensor line is connected and pinned down there and in the rubber grommet. The brake pipe support bracket's been done up, and the drop link's been done. What I did was, it was very easy to manoeuvre it back into place, but I did put one knot on the top to hold it in position while I dealt with it down here. Then I'm going to put the wheel back on, let it down, and then put those 3 nuts on top of the strut, and that is the job completed. So hope you found that interesting. If you want to see more videos, then just go down to the button down there and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. But if you're doing the job, good luck with yours.